Hey guys, welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds. I'm Nerdarchist Ted, and today I'm joined by
Nathan Nerdarch.
Ty Johnston.
And today we're going to get into the wonderful fictional worlds of Ty Johnston. Jump down to the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy, the newsletter. It's a great way to get gaming tips as well as learn how to game with us.
And you'll also find a whole bunch of links, or at least one big link, to the Amazon site where you can find out all about Ty Johnston's books.
Absolutely. So, as we said, the wonderful worlds of Ty Johnston. You are an author of how many books, sir?
To be honest, I've lost count.
50
plus, I would say.
Whoa.
That's proliferation right there.
That's quite a lot.
50 plus, probably roughly half of those are fantasy, maybe a little more than that.
So 50 plus books that you've got. How many series does that break down into, or are they more like individuals?
Even that's a complicated question to answer.
Some crossover going on?
There's a lot of crossover. There are what I think of as my Cron Darkbow books, after Cron Darkbow, one of my main characters, who currently has 6 novels, 2 trilogies, 3 each. But he also appears in a few novellas and some short stories.
Okay. So all of that would fall into one world.
That one world. But on top of that, I'll have to think, I'll just say at least 8 to 9 more novels plus short story collections within that world.
Okay.
But Cron Darkbow is not involved with them. Not directly, anyway. Mm-hmm. And some of those stories take place during the same time period as Cron. Some of those stories take place thousands of years before Cron's even born.
That kind of encompasses like 17 to 20 possible books.
At least.
In that world. So do we want to touch on that world first and then get into the other stuff?
We can go with that.
Right.
If someone were starting my reading, I would probably, you know what? Keep watching. Don't go away. I clearly
came prepared.
Bag of holding for 50
well,
bucks.
semi-prepared.
Oh, City of Rogues. Check that out.
If anyone were going to start reading my fantasy books and wanted to start at the beginning, even though timeline-wise this sort of happens in the middle, I would suggest starting with City of Rogues. That's the first Cron Darkbow book.
By Ty Johnston.
By Ty Johnston. The Kobalas trilogy is what it's called.
The Ursian Chronicles?
The Ursian Chronicles is all the stories that happen place in that world. And that's the first book in the first trilogy. And actually I have here the entire second trilogy, the Horrors of Bond trilogy. I have those with me here. That's the second.
Lousy Bond.
Oh. It's not that Bond. There's actually a city named Bond. So
Bond.
It's
Horrors of Bond.
Yes, Bond. Horrors of Bond. And there are a few individual novels and things, also collections, based in the Ursian Chronicles.
So as it says on the back cover, Cron Darkbow seeks vengeance, and he plans to have it no matter the cost. Returning to the city of his birth after 15 years, he hunts down the wizards responsible for the deaths of those he loves, only to discover another was responsible for the murders. The other is Belagod the Liar, a former barbarian chieftain who is now boss of the city's underworld. Come on, how do you not want to read that?
And my favorite, I won't call him a villain, antagonist, I'll say that. Belagod the Liar is my favorite antagonist I've ever written. Yeah.
Very cool. So City of Rogues, Road to Wrath, Dark King of the North.
That's the first trilogy right there. And the second Cron trilogy is Ghost of the Asylum, Demon Chains, and The Company of Seven.
So, without too many spoilers, what do you think about this world that Cron lives in? What is the major selling point of this fantasy setting?
Well, the fantasy setting is like a number. I'll admit, relatively straightforward, sort of medieval Renaissance fantasy, typical D&D fantasy. But there aren't other races.
So it's just humans.
For the most part, there are a couple of races that are very rare. Like if we were playing a game, they wouldn't be player characters. Right. They could be NPCs. They're so rare. But yes, 99.9% of the population is human throughout. Religion's a little different for the most part, at least during the time of Cron Darkbow. There's only one god. So there's not a pantheon of gods, though there is at an earlier time there were more gods. And I cover that in a short series called The Walking Gods Trilogy, which took place about 10,000 years before Cron Darkbow shows up. So there's a couple little differences from your sort of traditional.
So what is the selling point on Cron Darkbow? Why is he such a central character for these stories?
From an action-adventure point of view, think of Kron as, at least early on when he's young in this book, think of him as kind of Batman set in a fantasy world. You know, he's very much sort of along those lines.
So, competent fighter and investigator all in one.
Some rogue skills too. You know, if we were playing D&D with him, might even have a level or two of ranger, possibly, for tracking people. If not monk abilities, at least some unarmed feats also.
So he's spread out all across the board.
He is. He's got a lot of different skills and stuff from his background. Now, from more of a literary part of what I try to show through these 6 books is basically Kron's growing up, and I don't mean from his childhood on up. I mean emotionally. He's a very different person in this first book than he is by the 6th book, the 6th Kron Dark.
Now, a proper author, like yourself, should take their characters through a change. If they are fairly static throughout, that means their life experiences are not accumulating, and you're getting more akin to a kid's television show where the characters, despite doing everything that they've done in all the episodes previously, are exactly the same at the beginning of every single episode.
And one of the things, especially with this first book, that I wanted to draw comparisons to is between Kron as the main character or main protagonist and Belgad, the main antagonist, is who's the real good guy and who's the real bad guy here. Because Kron seems in a way like a hero, but he does some pretty atrocious things in this book. Belgad seems like the bad guy, but he also has a number of rather redeeming qualities about him. And I've even had readers come back to me and point that out. Some like it and some don't, you know, as with anything.
Well, some people want their heroes to be heroic, and
yes, white hat and that. And Kron definitely does not start off that way.
Well, he's on the path of revenge, right, to start off.
That's true.
That's always erring on the darker gray of the grayscale.
Yeah, and we want, you know, or at least I want my characters who are around for a long time to grow emotionally, to become more mature. That doesn't necessarily mean they'll always grow for the better. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't, depending on who they are and what happens. For me personally, and people who like those kind of stories, Kron's is an ongoing story of growth and change in his character. And
yeah, I read some of the back covers, digital back covers of it, and it got me interested in seeing that character change and development. So I'm interested in picking these up when I get a chance.
And there's going to be more books. If I live long enough, and Kron will continue to change. His will be a lifelong journey, however long he lives.
So let me ask this question. I know my reading log has had quite a lot of number of books on it, and in a lot of different styles. So first question is it first person perspective, third person perspective? How is the style written?
For these books, it's generally third person, past.
Okay.
For the most part, is what it'll be.
Because I know, there's been times that I know if I have one person's point of view while reading, I read through those books faster than if I have to constantly jump characters. So, now, everybody out there reads their own way, and I'm certain that if it's got all these books after it, it's got to be fantastic.
Well, thank you. I hope so. I've had plenty of people tell me they are. So,
and the second question is, while writing either your entire writing style or these books in particular, is there a particular author that you try to emulate or copy or mirror from or whatever?
I would say, rather than that, what kind of inspired you to get into writing in the first place?
Well, from the youngest age that I can remember, I'm at least 5 or 6 years old, I knew I wanted to be a writer, and a fiction writer of some kind, to create my own worlds, to create my own characters. Back then, as we mentioned in another video, it kind of started with comic books. And then a little bit older, I discovered Tolkien, and then Star Wars came along. So, and Star Trek had been part of so genre fiction was always kind of part of my growing up, one way or another.
So writers and D&D itself.
Oh, exactly. Not only Tolkien, but other writers like Robert E. Howard, the creator of Conan, the Cimmerian. And the Thieves World books were starting to come out in the late 70s. Those were an early big influence on me. And then throughout the 80s, there were writers like Fred Saberhagen influenced me, Andrew J. Offutt, Stephen King, which though Stephen King's probably influenced every writer whether they want to admit it or not, just about nowadays. In the 90s, probably started to read a little more thicker fiction, really thick books, guys like Stephen Erickson, some George Martin, that kind of thing. I read a lot of R.A. Salvatore during the 90s. And then lately I've probably been floating around a little bit more, doing a lot more. And there have been some non-fantasy writers who have had influence on me. Ed McBain, who wrote Police Procedural, comes to mind.
Yeah. So did you want to get into any other series that you have going on? Is there anything that you want
to... Well, the Cron Darkbow books, or the Ursian Chronicles books, are kind of my main series, my main books, but I occasionally will write a horror novel here and there. Probably my best known one is one called The Storm. It's about a small town in Kentucky, and I won't go into everything there. I don't want to spoil anything. Let's just say they have some problems with things that come out at night.
Well, if it's a horror book, then clearly bad stuff happens.
Well, of course.
I mean, that's not a spoiler. That's just a given.
It's not all peaches and cream and bunny rabbits and everything.
Like, yes, I wrote this fantastic horror movie. You go into a town and nothing goes wrong.
That sounds like Dungeons and Doilies to me.
Well, that could be. That could be. And every now and then I'll write something a little more literary, serious work, so to speak, as some people would consider it. In fact, I wrote probably my best known work. There's a book called More Than Kin, which is about an older man who finds out he's dying of cancer, and he's trying to reach out to his long lost son that he's not had contact with in a while. So serious topic, but again.
So your works really cover the gamut.
I've tried to. I maybe not novel length, but I do write science fiction from time to time.
So I imagine your romance books are quite
those
fast.
I've stayed away from. I have written a little Western. I think my next book's probably going to be a horror novel, and when just lots of terrible things happen to truck drivers.
I gotta love the highway noise.
Or maybe train engineers.
That's what happens when you get Nerdarchy on the road. There's times that you gotta travel and you gotta get videos wherever you can.
We're almost on the road.
That's true. We can see the highway from here.
So any last pointers or tips that you want to throw out there to our audience that might be potential authors?
Well, a big one is always keep at it. It's a lot harder than it might seem for some people. Some people think, oh, it's a fake job, or you can just sit down and write a book. Tell them to try it sometime. Whenever somebody comes up to you and says, hey, I have a great idea for a book. Here's my idea, you go write it. Tell them no. Tell them to go write it. Because the idea is the easy part. It really is. It's the sitting down for the hours and weeks and months.
Crunching it out.
And crunching it out. That's really the hard part.
My experience with writing, even on the website, there's been times where it's like, all right, our goal for the website is typically between 500 and 2,000 words. And there's been times I'm like, I don't have anything else to say, and I'm only at 452 words. What else can I say? I need 48 more. So, granted, that's only happened once. A lot of times you get Ted talking, and I just don't shut up. Ask anybody who's met me in person.
And sometimes you just draw a blank. I mean, especially if you write fairly often. Mm-hmm. Every now and then there's going to be that day where it's like, I just can't think of anything to write today. The well is empty. And sometimes you got to take some time off and let the well fill
So
back
there you
up.
have it. Keep writing. Every once in a while, take a break, but you got to come back to the project. I know, not from my personal perspective, but from author stories that I heard, there was a time that it's like, all right, you open up a document, you start typing. When you run out of room on that one, go type onto another topic, just to keep the brain pattern flowing. What do you guys think? Have you read Ty's books? Are you going to? Jump down below and put your comments down there. While you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
And patronize us in a good way over on Patreon.
And don't forget to check out the articles over at nerdarchy.com.
So until next time, stay nerdy.